Be informed so you can inform others. Until you are well informed, you are not in a position to inform others. Otherwise, you'll be misinforming them. I have seen and heard people say many times, even some of them in government, to say the reform is so we can generate more revenues. No. If you set out to do a tax reform with the objective of generating more revenue, you'll be placing the cart before the horse. That's not how to move forward. The horse needs to be in front. So taxes are the consequences of economic activities. So if you want people to pay more personal income tax, it's called personal income tax. Then let's have a conversation about how the people who have no jobs can get jobs. People who are doing self-employed activities can get more business. How businesses can expand so they hire more people. So when more people earn income, they pay income tax. The things we are working on includes a national fiscal policy framework, because many people ask us, are you just talking about tax? How about how government is spending the money? So the mandate that was given to us by Mr. President actually covers spending, the discipline of how we spend our money, the priority of where we spend our money, and the quality of those spending to impact the lives of the Nigerian people. This reform is a win-win for everyone, rich and poor. Of course, benefit the poor more than the rich.
The Presidential Fiscal Policy and Tax Reforms Committee was set up on July 7, 2023 by President Bola Ahmed Tinubu. After more than a year of extensive deliberation and consultation, the committee submitted its report in October 2024, which resulted in the transmission of executive bills to the National Assembly, which stoutly rose to the occasion and at the end of the day passed into law 4 tax reform acts. The acts take effect from January 1, 2026. The committee is headed by Mr. Taiwo Oyedele. So quite naturally, Mr. Oyedele speaks on behalf of the committee without meaning, and we do repeat, without meaning to be the sole voice. But let's give it to Mr. Oyedele. He does it very well. He knows his onions. He's on top of that transformative national assignment given to him and members of his committee. And so when he speaks, you want to listen. Take a listen to this.
Thank you once again for joining us. We know that the new tax reform laws have been generating a lot of interest. We have seen people who genuinely want to educate their audience. We have also seen quite a number who, out of not having the right knowledge, seem to be misinforming their followers, and maybe a few who are doing so intentionally. Whatever the case may be, we believe that the right thing to do is for government to continue to communicate with sincerity of purpose and with clarity. So this is the reason why we thought we should invite those important stakeholders who indeed shape the narrative, so that when we are able to clarify the issues for them, they would also be able to help us clarify those issues for others. So that is the essence of the session we're having today. If you look at the image on the screen, it's a story that I read about. Whether it happened in real life or not, I'm not sure, but it's a good story to tell the story around context. It was about a sales director who worked for Coca-Cola in the US, where he had been very successful. So he was transferred to the Middle East to go and promote the business of Coca-Cola in the Middle East. Not being able to speak Arabic, he came up with this brilliant idea of how to promote the product using images. So in his own views, he thought of a man who was tired and dehydrated in the desert until he took a bottle of Coke and then he regained his energy. Unfortunately for him, in the US, while people read from left to right, in the Middle East, they read from right to left. So they read the advert as a man who was energetic and strong until he took a bottle of Coke and he lost his energy. So the advert had the opposite impact because the context was different. So the reason I thought to bring this analogy is that there are no two countries that are similar. In fact, the same country will have a different context between different times. So when we are thinking about policies, we have to think about context. You know, we sometimes say that if you copy, remember to paste special.
Talk about the full picture. What was the event? Where did Mr. Oyedele speak? The event was an interactive session with journalists, influencers and public analysts on the new tax laws, which was held in Lagos on Friday, October 3rd, 2025. So, let's get down to business.
The tax reforms are the most significant, the most impactful, and the most comprehensive in the history of Nigeria, where we repealed all the major tax laws and we drafted new ones. And these new tax laws, 4 altogether, are introducing more than 200 measures. But there is a temptation to narrow it down to one thing at a time. During the passage of the bills at the National Assembly, you may be tempted to think that it was all about VAT sharing formula. At some point, it felt like, and more recently, that it was all about fuel surcharge, right? There's a temptation to narrow it down to one item. At some point, it was personal income tax is going to be imposed on low-income earners and poor people. But just be mindful that these are holistic reforms where things are likely to move in different directions, some going up, some coming down, but keeping the overall objective in mind, which is to improve the well-being, livelihoods of the Nigerian people and guarantee a sustainable fiscal future for our country.
Mr. Oyedele continued by painting a picture of the standard of living of Nigerians before 2023 and argued that it is not a question of whether life or standard of living has become better or worse in 2025 as opposed to pre-May 2023, but that it could have been worse.
I have heard people say many times, and they will ask a simple question, which is that, is your life better today than it was 2 years ago in May 2023? And more often than not, the answer to that question will be a resounding no, leading to a wrong conclusion that the policies have been bad. You know why that question is wrong? When you ask someone whether their life is better today than it was 2 years ago, you make an assumption that if the policies had not been introduced, their lives would have been the same today as it was 2 years ago. This is a very big fallacy. And so what I've done here is to give some data to paint a picture for us of where Nigeria was as of May 2023. And what could have happened if these reforms had not been introduced today in 2025? So I have information about pre-May 2023, and you see I try to use the colors coding for traffic lights, which is amber, maybe turning red, or amber, turning green. Nigeria in May 2023 was amber all over the place, waiting to turn red. And some of the indicators were to do with our balance of payments. We got much less FX than the FX we needed, leading to multiple official exchange rate windows and a wide margin to the parallel markets. It was so bad, manufacturers were no longer getting FX to import raw materials and equipment. We had over 7 billion of forward contracts when companies, businesses, had borrowed naira to buy dollars, and we couldn't find dollars to give them. In fact, some businesses like Emirates stopped flying to Nigeria because there was no point for them earning naira that they couldn't take out to their home country. Nigeria was gradually being disconnected from the rest of the world because of the scarcity of FX. We had printed more than 30 trillion naira in ways and means. The amount we printed plus the accumulated interest. And it was pumped into the economy because government was spending almost its entire revenue to service debt. So they had to then borrow money to do everything else, including paying salaries of civil servants. Since the tax revenue was not forthcoming, oil revenue was not forthcoming, they resorted into printing of naira to spend. If this does not scare you, nothing else will scare you in the world, because this is the fastest way for an economy to come into total collapse. We've seen countries where this has happened before, like Zimbabwe, where inflation got to a point where it was hyperinflation measured in million percentage. Prices doubled every other day, right? And at a point, their currency became totally worthless. You hold 100 trillion Zimbabwe dollars, and it wasn't enough to buy a loaf of bread. People left money on the streets, and they went back to trade by barter. Because when you print money to spend, is the fastest way to crash an economy. We printed not just 1, not 2, not 3 trillion, more than 30 trillion naira. The NNPC that was supposed to be remitting money to the Federation account had no money to remit to the Federation account. They had used all our entitlement to crude oil and gas to subsidize PMS. It wasn't enough. All the taxes they were supposed to pay to FRX, they used it for subsidy. It wasn't enough. They took the royalty oil by all the oil companies that was supposed to be sold and paid to the Federation account to subsidize PMS. It wasn't enough. Then the NNPC began to use future production as security to borrow in double-digit interest rate now to subsidize current consumption of PMS. We had committed most of our future production that today we can barely boast of up to 200,000 barrels equivalent. Ladies and gentlemen, in my estimation, we had less than 6 months left from May 2023 for all our future production to be fully committed, by which time there will be nothing else to use, and we cannot print dollars because we are not America, and we will not have been able to import any refined product anymore. God forbid, like Nigerians will say, you hold 5,000, 10,000 naira, you will not find a liter of fuel to buy. And Dangote refinery will not have come on stream because they can't be selling, they can't borrow $20 billion to build a refinery, sell it at 200 naira per liter, and go and beg and pray for government to pay subsidy. The government that is already using all their revenue to service debt and printing naira. This was a very dire situation that Nigeria was in, and it was no longer sustainable. It was going to collapse by itself which could have been very disorderly, or government had a choice to make the tough policy decision, which, though painful, was necessary.
Still on pre-May 2023.
If these reforms had not been done, I'll say again, because we like to say that in Nigeria, God forbid, this is where Nigeria will be today. Nigeria will be in a position where our trade deficit and negative balance would have expanded. Nobody was bringing money again. Nobody will bring their money if everything there looks confused and trapped. Multiple exchange windows would have expanded with a very significant margin to official rate and parallel markets. The amount we are owing people who wanted to buy dollars would have increased from over $7 billion to much more than $10 billion. Our tax to GDP ratio would have crashed completely, and government would have printed easily more than 50 trillion, because you can imagine the entire money to run the government since 2023 would have been printed. We were already printing it as of 2023. There was no other money coming in. So imagine the money to run government for 2 years added to 30 trillion. We'll be talking about somewhere around 60 to 70 trillion today. Inflation will not be 20 or 30%. That would be to be celebrated. God forbid, it will be thousands of percentages where prices are running away. And in that economy, you can't grow, real sector cannot thrive, and life will be essentially almost impossible. So, but thank God we're not there. The government made a hard decision. Nigerian people made the sacrifices, but it's beginning to show positive signs. There are other points there that you can look into, including how much we're generating as revenue as a percentage of GDP. But fast forward 2 years later, as a result of those policies, they were beginning to yield positive macro results at the macro level, national level. And they need to be quickly translated into micro results for individuals and households. But the direction of travel is positive. We now have a positive balance of trade and trade surplus. We now have money going into the Federation account from the NNPC in form of revenue. We are no longer printing naira to spend, even though we are still reeling from the impact of the one we printed before. And we now have the tax to GDP ratio to be 13.5% from less than 10% before. And we now have also that the federal government is no longer printing money, and we're no longer subsidizing wasteful PMS regime. So all of this combined means that the direction of travel is positive. That's what you see on this middle column. This is where we are today as a result of the reforms. So in summary, what I just said to you, which is the right question, anytime some of you interview analysts, economists, right? You know, one thing I've seen in Nigeria is it's so convenient and tempting to play into public narratives. But if you want to move your country forward, you have to be honest. Sometimes that's not what we want to hear, but we should be honest with ourselves. So 2 years ago, it was amber over here. We had two choices. One was to reform, so it was already hard times. One option was to reform, and it would be harder times before things get better. Or we could continue with business as usual, and the hard time becomes the hardest of times with total economic collapse. There are no two scenarios to it. That's the only two options. No other options was available. People could interrogate how the policies were introduced, and those are debates that we should have. but we must never forget that the reforms were necessary. So, if we narrow down to tax matters, which is the main focus for our conversation today, why did we need the tax reforms? You know, they say if it's not broken, why are you trying to fix it? But actually, it was broken, and there was a need to fix it. In fact, the need to fix the tax system was long overdue. And the analogy I have here is, if the global tax system, different countries around the world, were represented by cars, and those cars are in a race because we live in a competitive global village, the picture will look like what you have on the screen. Nigeria will be the 1960 Volkswagen B2. And even in Africa, some developed tax systems like South Africa, like Rwanda, would be the more modern Pojo in the middle. And the most advanced economies in the world, with their developed tax systems like the OECD countries, will be the Tesla Cybertruck that you see to the top right. If we have to be honest with ourselves, in this race, it doesn't matter how hard the Nigerian driver works. It doesn't matter the number of years of experience. It doesn't even matter how hard they pray and fast. This race cannot be won by that driver. And the problem is not with the driver, the problem is with the car. And the solution to that problem is not to replace the tires of that car. The solution is not to find a better engine for the car. The solution is to replace the car completely. So this is the reason why we repeal all the old tax laws we inherited from our colonial masters before many of us were born, certainly before I was born. And we're still managing those tax laws in 2024-2025 for a world that is vastly different from when those laws were made. In fact, the British that gave us many of the laws have reenacted and reviewed their laws times and times again. But we were stuck with our past, so much so that it was now becoming an impediment to our growth and prosperity. The system was unconducive for growth. We have multiplicity of taxes and many taxing agencies. We have some of the highest corporate tax burden on businesses, ranking in the top 10 globally. We were taxing poverty. Our poorest people had to pay tax, PAYE. We deducted from source. They didn't even have a choice to say they have no ability to pay. We deducted from source. And whatever was left could not take them home anymore. We're taxing capital and investments. Businesses who want to invest, which is risky enough. And as if that was not bad enough, we added tax burden on their investments, thereby increasing their risk of failure. Our laws were archaic, and they had ambiguous provisions, such that even when people want to comply, it's difficult to figure out what exactly we're asking them to pay, who to pay to, and when those payments should be made. This is the major reason why Mr. President said, and we are grateful to him, that he was not ready to negotiate the need for the reforms. He was willing to negotiate the content of those reforms. And I think that's the right leadership for such a transformative reform.
What approach has the committee taken in carrying out its assignment?
So, how are we doing the reforms? I have seen and heard people say many times, even some of them in government, to say the reform is so we can generate more revenues. No. If you set out to do a tax reform with the objective of generating more revenue, you'll be placing the cart before the horse. That's not how to move forward. The horse needs to be in front. So taxes are the consequences of economic activities. So if you want people to pay more personal income tax, it's called personal income tax. Then let's have a conversation about how the people who have no jobs can get jobs. People who are doing self-employed activities can get more business. How businesses can expand so they hire more people. So when more people earn income, they pay income tax. When more people earn income, they buy goods and services and they pay value-added tax. That's how economies work. So therefore, in these reforms, our mandate was very clear. Focus on the people. It should be pro-people. How do you reduce the burden on the people? Focus on growth. How can the economy grow? Small businesses growing, medium-sized businesses growing, large firms growing, multinationals growing. How can Nigerian companies become multinational so that even if the price of crude oil comes down, we don't panic because we have companies bringing billions of dollars from all over the world? Why is that not happening in Nigeria? Growth. And number 3 is, how can we ensure there's efficiency in everything we do? Efficiency in government policy, in government spending, and the operating environment. Building on that, we have done quite a number of things. Some we are still working on, and some we plan to do. So it is work in progress. Some of the things we have done that many of you may be aware of is that a withholding tax regulation was introduced in 2024, and it took effect from 1st of January 2025, this year already. And it eliminated withholding taxes on many businesses, especially small ones, agri, and manufacturing. And it reduced the withholding tax rate on many other businesses, including services. What does that even mean? When you issue an invoice to your customer to pay you for services or supplies of goods, let's say the amount you are supposed to be paid is 10 million naira. If there's a withholding tax of 10%, your customer is required to retain 1 million out of your 10 million and give you only 9 million to cover your costs and everything you're doing, and give the 1 million to government in advance of when you need to pay your taxes, which could be in another 1 year, another 18 months. And we thought that was not very helpful for companies to borrow at high interest rates, only for that money to be tied down with the government, instead of allowing them to use that money to grow their business and finance their working capital. So this was the reason why the withholding tax regulation was introduced. In addition to the withholding tax regulation, we had increased the exemption threshold for small businesses. Our data does not support the general narrative that government money is in the informal sector. And this is the reason why Nigeria has ended up introducing multiple taxes, because we are trying to chase people in the informal sector every now and then. When in fact, more than 90% of operators in that sector are just there for survival. They're just trying to find how to put food on the table one day to another. They have no capacity to pay taxes. If somebody is roasting corn by the roadside, if they have customers from when they resume in the morning till they close at night, they are still a poor person. If somebody is a vulcanizer, hoping that tires will go flat so they can help you inflate it, if they have customers all around for the day, they're still a poor person. If somebody is pushing wheelbarrow to carry goods for people, and they have customers all time round the day, in fact, if they don't even sleep, let's say they can survive without sleeping, 24 hours they are pushing things around, they're still poor. They have no capacity to pay taxes. and they should not be taxed. This is the reason why Mr. President said we should no longer tax poverty. We should no longer tax capital. We should not tax seed, but wait for the fruit. That is very instructive. It's a change in mindset from what we've always done in Nigeria. The things we are working on includes a national fiscal policy framework, because many people ask us, are you just talking about tax? How about how government is spending the money? So the mandate that was given to us by Mr. President actually covers spending, the discipline of how we spend our money, the priority of where we spend our money, and the quality of those spending to impact the lives of the Nigerian people. We also have a lot of work we are still doing on harmonization of taxes. Some of the taxes have already been harmonized in the new tax laws, but there are many of those taxes, particularly at the subnational, state and local government level, that cannot be harmonized by enacting a new law. Why? Because those taxes are contained in the Constitution. And as you know very well, you cannot write a law to override the Constitution. Our Constitution today, under the 4th schedule, for example, empower local government to collect taxes such as wheelbarrow tax, bicycle tax, produce tax, radio levy, television levy. You know, whatever it is that was the circumstances at the time those laws were enacted. It could be that having a radio was a sign of wealth in those days. Fast forward to 2025, we have succeeded in taxing poverty. So the process for amending the Constitution will not be easy, but that process has started. So whatever it is that we can harmonize without being unconstitutional, we have included in the new tax laws. The ones that conflict with the Constitution, the process for amending the Constitution is ongoing. And this is where we need the help of all Nigerian people, because this is a fundamental problem we must solve. This problem is so important to Mr. President. He said it on day one during his inaugural speech. When he was being sworn in, he mentioned it specifically: multiplicity of taxes. I have been a tax professional practicing tax in Nigeria for more than 25 years. This is something we were taught while we were in school. We are still speaking about it today. The number of taxes have even increased even more. But we must find the will, and we must find the commitment as a people to solve that problem once and for all. It wasn't created for us by God. It was self-inflicted. So which means the solution also lies with us. But bear in mind that by 1st of January 2026, you will not suddenly be on the road and all the multiple taxes will disappear. No, because the process involved is a lot more than enacting a new law. Let's quickly speak to some of the contentious issues. And you know, there's a quote there that I love so much. You see under the heading that says, "You are not entitled to your opinion. You are only entitled to your informed opinion, because no one is entitled to be ignorant." This is a quote by Harlan Ellison. And it's so important for those of us who are in this very important position of informing others. You can't just express your opinion. It has to be an informed opinion. We have seen many people that have no experience, no training, no qualification, no education in tax matters, suddenly calculating taxes that people will pay. I think that is being irresponsible, especially when you say it with authority, like you know it, right? You can say, "I think," or at least ask someone. You're likely to have a friend who is an accountant or a tax practitioner, a finance person. Don't just wake up and calculate stuff and then create a panic that from January, all the poor people in Nigeria will be made to pay 20%. I saw one that says the average is 20%. By just adding 15% plus 25% and dividing by 2. Like, seriously. So, be informed so you can inform others. Until you are well informed, you are not in a position to inform others. Otherwise, you'll be misinforming them. In fact, there's something I believe, and I shared this when I was having a leadership training for a company recently. And I said that if you are incompetent in your role, it is unethical. Whatever you may be an engineer, you may be a scientist. If you decide to be a journalist, you have decided to be a journalist. It is your duty to find the relevant knowledge to perform your role well as a journalist. If you fail in performing well, you are being unethical in what you do. If I've decided to be a tax professional, it is my duty to find the knowledge and the skills so I can perform my role with responsibility.
Against the background of the foregoing, Mr. Oyedele proceeded to set the record straight. In doing this, he highlighted correct positions of the new laws on the various tax types and the administrative procedure outlined in the acts. He also corrected misinformation and inaccuracies. You will do well to stay with us on this channel to get the benefit of this clarification. Thank you for watching, and do watch out for the upcoming episodes on personal income tax, on value-added tax, on companies' income tax, and many more.